Today I'm going to show you how to make a tree like this. We're going to make the mesh, the texture, and the shader for the leaves. This is going to be a very long video and very complete as well. I'm also going to have a link in the description with all of the assets that I made in the video. So well, I hope you enjoy it. And as always, everything begins in Blender. So let's take the default cube, go into edit mode, select everything, press M, and merge everything at the center, like this. Now we gotta add two modifiers. It will be the skin modifier and the subdivision surface. And here in the skin modifier, I'm gonna toggle the smooth shading. Now we can select the vertice and we can press E to extrude it. And we can also press Ctrl A to scale it. Now all we gotta do is make the shape of the tree. When shaping the tree, I make it very simple. I start with the trunk and then I make the main branches. I generally make 3 of them. Then I take the tips of the branches and I scale them. And I also take the trunk of the tree and I scale it more. Okay, now that we have the basic shape of the tree, we can start making the small details. So I'm going to start by going into this vertex here, for example, and start branching off a little bit. Like make another one like this. And here I'm going to make another one like this that is going to branch off twice. Let's make something like this. You don't have to go too overboard in this step, it's just to add a little bit of detail so it's not looking one-dimensional. Let's do like this. One thing I'm going to do is rotate the branches a little bit. I'm going to select all of the vertices of this branch, for example, going to the top view, and I'm going to move it a little bit to the side and rotate it a little bit so it's not going straight into the x-axis. Same thing for these ones here on the top. I'm going to select them, going to the top view, remove them a bit to the side, rotate them a little bit, so it's not going straight. One thing I don't see being brought up enough in these type of tutorials is the roots of the tree. Most of the time they just make the trunk a bit thicker in the bottom and that's it. And sadly, this is a mistake that I've made in the past, and you can see how much of a difference it makes. So for this tree, I'm going to make it a bit different. I'm going to take the bottom vertice and I'm going to have it on the center of the y-axis. I'm going to scale it down a little. And now I'm going to extrude it to the sides like this. And do it for all 4 directions. One thing you can do is adding a plane to kind of mimic the ground so you have an idea of how it's going to look like. Let's scale it up. Let's take the tree. Let's move it up a little bit. Like this. So now we have an idea on how the roots are going to look like. And I think they look pretty good. Now that we have the shape of the tree, we can apply the modifiers. So let's apply the skin and the subdivision. And now we're going to add the multi-resolution modifier. And we're going to subdivide it around 3 times. Then you apply the multi-resolution. Go into sculpting mode. Take the clay strips, set the strength to something around 0.3, 0.2. And just make up and down strokes around the trunk of the tree, like this. I usually don't bother doing this for the branches because they're going to be covered in leaves anyway. And now that we have the basic sculpting for the tree, I like to take the clay strips and changing the radius to something smaller, like 30 pixels, and the strength to something around 0.8, 0.7, and then I do singular strokes on the tree to add some depth and some stylized detail. Okay, now that we have the tree, let's go into edit mode, select all of the vertices, press U, go to Smart UV Project, press OK. Then you can duplicate the tree and add a decimate modifier. I'm gonna go with 0.25, I'm gonna apply it. I'm gonna go with 0.25 again. As you can see, it still looks pretty good, so let's add another decimate. Let's go with 0.25 again, and I think this is as much as I'm gonna go. Still has some detail, but it's starting to look a bit low poly for me. Now that we have our 2 meshes, I'm gonna rename them. This will be trunk high poly, and this will be trunk low poly. Now I'm gonna select the low poly version, go to File, Export, FBX. I'm gonna mark Selected Objects. I'm gonna go to Geometry and mark Tangent Space. Rename the file, and export FBX. Then you do the same thing for the high poly version. Now that we have the mesh for the tree, we gotta make the texture. And I'm gonna be using Substance Painter, which is a paid software, but you know what they say. The One Piece is real. Okay, so open up Substance Painter, go to File, New, then go to Select, and we're gonna select the low poly version that we just made. I'm gonna change the resolution to 2048, press OK. Then I'm gonna go into Texture Set Settings, Bake Mesh Map, and here on High Definition Meshes, I'm gonna select the high poly version that we just made. I'm gonna change the output size to 2048 as well, and bake selected textures. Okay, finished, so let's return to painting mode. I'm gonna change from material to base color. Let's go back to layers, and take the layer 1 and delete it. Now we add a fill layer. Let's call it base color. I'm gonna uncheck all of these settings here, just leave the color. Then I'm gonna select a base color for the tree. I like to go with a more desaturated color for the base, something like this. Now we're gonna add another fill layer. It's gonna be our color variation 1. We're gonna add a black mask and a fill. And here on the fill, we're gonna select a grunge. I'm gonna go with grunge wood soft, and I'm gonna increase the tiling a little bit. Now I'm gonna click here and change the color. I'm gonna use the color picker to take the base color and make it a little bit lighter. Now I'm gonna click on the layer, press Ctrl D to duplicate it. I'm gonna rename it to color var 2. Select the grunge, go into the grayscale and select a different one. I'm gonna go with the grunge wood hard. And here in the color, I'm gonna take the base color again. But I'm just gonna make it a little bit darker this time. I'm gonna decrease the tiling a little bit, something like this. Okay, now we're gonna add another fill layer. This will be our ambient occlusion. We're gonna add a black mask, generator, and we're gonna select the ambient occlusion. Let's change the color of the ambient occlusion to a dark color. So let's go here and select a very dark gray. Let's go back to the settings, and first thing I'm gonna do is invert. And now I'm gonna play a little bit with the balance. As you can see, the tree is not very affected by ambient occlusion. As you can see, let's increase it a lot. So let's leave it more like this and add some blur, so it's not looking ugly like this. Let's add a little bit of blur. Now we're gonna add another fill layer, a black mask, generator, and instead of ambient occlusion, we're gonna select dirt. Now let's play a little bit with the settings of the dirt. Okay, I like the way this looks, so let's change the color to something more greenish, to a dark green. And let's rename it to dirt. Now I'm gonna add another fill layer. This will be our curves. We're gonna add a black mask, generator, and here we're gonna go into mask editor. And this layer will be the highlights of the tree. So let's go into the curve opacity, and we gotta play with these settings over here. And also the global balance. I'm gonna decrease it quite a bit, so we only have the highlights showing up. Okay, I'm satisfied with the result, so let's change the color of the highlights. I'm gonna go again into the base color, and I'm gonna select a lighter color. I think the tree lacks a little bit of depth, so I'm gonna change the dirt a little bit. First, I'm gonna change the color to something like a pale brown, and I'm also gonna change the level a little bit. I'm gonna increase it. Okay, now let's go back to the color variation. I'm gonna select the second one, and I'm gonna duplicate it again. And instead of the wood hard, I'm gonna select a different grunge. I'm gonna go with the dirt splats. And for the color, I'm gonna select the base color again and select a bit of a lighter color, like this. Now I'm gonna duplicate it, and I rename this to Moss 1. I'm gonna pick a green color, and I'm gonna select the stain spots over here. I'm gonna change the tiling a little bit, and change the color to a dark, desaturated green. I'm gonna duplicate it, change the stain spots to this map 004, and change the color to an even darker green. Now that we have the basic elements of the texture, we can add the filters. So let's go to the color variation 1, select the grunge, and add filter. For the filter, we're gonna go with the blur slope, I'm just gonna press Ctrl D and add it to each and every layer. This is how it looks like. As you can see, it's pretty trash, but now we can just change the amount of blur on the layers. So for the curves, I like to put a very low amount. For the dirt, and even less. I think I might even remove the blur from the dirt. Same thing for the ambient occlusion. I think it looks fine without the blur, so let's remove it. The moss I think looks fine with the blur, so let's leave it. I think the color variation 3 looks better with the 50%. The color variation 2 is very fine in detail, so I'm going to leave it very low, like 15. And the same applies for the color variation 1. Okay, I think the moss is a bit too strong, so I'm just going to change the opacity to something like 40%. I'm going to do the same for the second moss. Something like 50%. And I'm pretty satisfied with the result. We can change everything later on, so let's go into File, Export Texture. Select the path of the folder you want to save. Don't forget to change the name of the material because this will be the name of the file as well. Then you click export and you're done. Now let's go to Unity, take the tree that we just made and apply it to the scene. And as you can see, we have the two versions that we made, the high poly and the low poly version. So let's make a material for them. I'm going to go create new material. Here on the smoothness, I'm going to set it to 0. And for the base map, we're going to search for the file that we just exported. It's going to be the base color. And we're going to do the same thing for the normal map. Now let's apply the material. And as you can see, both versions are looking pretty similar despite the difference in polygons. One thing that you gotta keep in mind is that the color is gonna get a lot darker whenever you put it in Unity for some reason. I don't really know why, but I think it's because of the lighting that makes it darker, so be aware of that. Okay, now in Blender I can remove this plane, I'm not going to use it, and I can also remove the high poly version of the mesh because it already served its purpose. Now I'm going to add a new plane, I'm going to call it Leaves. Okay, so let's take our plane, let's move it up. Let's look to the side here and go into edit mode. I'm going to take this plane and I'm going to Shift D, duplicate it, and I'm going to rotate it. Oh my god, no, I'm going to rotate it like this. And I'm going to make a little square. I'm going to take this again, make a little box actually. I'm going to do it like this. And I'm going to go on this upper view, I'm going to select this top face and rotate it a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing for the other faces. Now I'm going to take this top face here, I'm going to Shift D again. I rotate it in this axis now, and I'm going to place it to the side. And I'm going to close the box like this. So now we're going to go back into object mode, and we're going to take all of them and we're going to duplicate and place them on the ends of the branches. Okay, now we can select all of them like this, press Ctrl J, and we're going to join all of them. Okay, as you can see, it's looking a bit small. The leaves should be a lot bigger than this, so let's go into edit mode again. Press A to select everything. We're gonna press the dot button. I don't know. It's this button over here. And we're gonna go into individual origins. We're gonna press S and scale everything up quite a bit, like this. Now the last thing we're gonna do is press Shift A. We're gonna add a mesh. We're gonna add a sphere. We're gonna go to the side view. We're gonna take this sphere. We're gonna place it in the middle. We're gonna press Tab, scale it up a lot, like this, until it covers all of the leaves. As you can see, we have some spaces on the side, so let's make it a little bit bigger until it covers everything. Now we're going to select the leaves. We're going to go to Modifiers, Data Transfer. We're going to select the sphere that we just made. We're going to select Face Corner Data, Custom Normals, and we're going to apply the modifier. Now you can delete the sphere, select the leaves, right-click, Shade Smooth, go into Object Properties, and turn on Auto Smooth. And it should look like this, which is a bit weird, but it's the right way. If you don't do this step, the leaves are going to look like this. It's going to be weird. You're going to be able to tell it's a flat plane. And you can kind of see it's a box that we made. And this is how it looks like after we do this step. As you can see, it looks much better than before. Okay, now all that's left is to make the shader for the leaves. So let's go to Unity, right-click, Create, Shadergraph, URP, and Lit Shadergraph. I'm gonna call it tree leaves. And here on the graph inspector, we're gonna turn on alpha clipping. We're gonna render both faces. And now we're gonna add some values here. Let's begin with a color. It's gonna be called color A. I'm gonna make another color, it's gonna be color B. I'm gonna add a texture, it's gonna be called texture. I'm gonna make a vector 2, is gonna be speed. A float for the scale. And a float for the strength. Now the first thing we're gonna do is take the texture, drag it here, connect it to a simple texture 2D. Now we're gonna take the color A and color B, and we're gonna connect it to a lerp. We're gonna take the UV node, connect it to a split, and we're gonna take the green channel and connect it to the T on the lerp. Now we can multiply the two, and we can connect to the base color. And I'm gonna take the alpha from the simple texture and connect to the alpha here. Let's save the asset. Now in Unity, we're gonna right-click the shader that we just made. We're gonna create a material. I'm gonna call it oak leaves, and I'm gonna apply it to the leaves of the tree. Now let's add a texture, and let's give it some color. As you can see, this is a gradient, so the bottom is gonna be this bright green, and the top is gonna be the darker green, or whatever color you choose. Now let's go back to the shader and make the wind movement of the leaves. We're gonna begin with a position node, connect to a tiling and offset. We're gonna take a time node, we're gonna multiply it by the speed, and we're gonna connect to the offset. We're gonna connect this to a gradient noise, to the UV of the gradient noise, and the scale is gonna be connected to the scale here. Let's add a value of 5 to the scale, and for the speed, let's add a 1. Now we're gonna connect this to a subtract. We're gonna make it 0.5. We're gonna multiply it by the strength. Let's give it a value of 1. Then we're gonna add. We're gonna add another position node. We're gonna split. We're gonna take the R channel. Now we're gonna combine. I'm gonna move it up a little bit to make some space. Now we're gonna have another position node, and we're gonna lerp. The combine will be the B. We're gonna take an UV node. We're gonna split. We're gonna take the green channel and put on the T. Now we're gonna plug this into a transform. We're gonna change from world to object, and we're gonna plug it into the position on the top of the fragment. Let's save and see what happens. Okay, if we check the material here, nothing changed, so let's go to the speed, put a 1 in the scale, and 1 in the strength. And as you can see, it's moving. So let's increase the scale a little bit, let's put a 5, and the speed to a 0.1. Strength could be a 0.3 or something. And as you can see, we have some movement on the leaves. The last thing you can do is make another float, let's call it smoothness, and plug it into the smoothness of the fragment here. Okay, now the leaves are not shiny anymore. You could change that here, you can make them shiny or not. It's up to your choice. And while using the same technique that I showed you, you can make trees like this one, like this one, like this one, and even these ones at the top. It's all about creativity. And well, that was it for the video. Don't forget to check the description, because there you can get the download links for the assets that I made in this video, such as the tree itself, the leaves, and the shader. So, I hope to see you in the next video.